Okay, for this kidney model, there are 3 parts, and each part is, they're all connected. So this is the kidney. We have 2 kidneys in the body, a right kidney and a left kidney. So this is obviously one of them. Then if we magnify the nephron, which is part of the kidney, that's what you see here. And then if we magnify even more, we're going to magnify this piece, and that's what you see here. So number 1, this is a renal corpuscle. This whole thing is the renal corpuscle. So let's start with our kidney model. So the first thing we see that stands out to us is the ureter, number 3. This is our ureter. Then we can see the renal pelvis, which is number 4. The renal pelvis, number 4. Then we have an artery here. This is number 2. This is our renal artery. You can see it here, the renal artery. Then number 1. This is the renal vein. So number 2 is the renal artery. Number 1 is the renal vein. Now the flow of blood towards the kidneys goes renal artery and vein. Then it goes segmental, which we don't need to know. Then it goes interlobar, which we do need to know, which is 13 and 17. So we need to know the interlobar artery and vein. So first we see this red is the interlobar artery. Number 13 is the interlobar artery. 13 is the interlobar artery. 17 is the interlobar vein, which connects then to the arcuate artery and vein, 16 and 18. You really can't see it very well, but this is 18, this is 16. So 18 is the arcuate vein, and 16 is the arcuate artery. So it goes from renal, we'll skip segmental, so renal, segmental, interlobar we need to know, and then arcuate. So R, S, I, A. Now arcuate artery and vein is on top of the pyramid. This whole thing is a renal pyramid. So arcuate artery and vein is on top of the renal pyramid. We see it here in this model. 7 is the renal arcuate vein, and red arcuate artery. So blue arcuate vein, 7 arcuate artery. You can see it here labeled as 16 and 18 on the kidney model. So 18 is the vein, the arcuate vein, and 16 is the arcuate artery. Remember, 13 was the interlobar artery, and 17 was the interlobar vein. 17 was the interlobar vein, and the artery was 13. And then you can see here, arcuate artery and vein, 16, 18. So this is the flow of blood to the kidneys, this right here. Blood vessels of the kidney, right there. Collecting ducts are number 8. We can see that here in white. The collecting duct is this loopy thing, kind of off on its own, adjacent to the interlobar artery and vein. Then the renal medulla is number A, which is here. It's deeper compared to the renal cortex, which is on the outside, which is B, which is lining the kidney. The cortex, or the outside, the outermost part of the kidney, is the cortex. So that's B. And then A is deeper, it's the renal medulla. These nipple-like projections that you see, these little dots, that's called papilla, renal papillae, with an E at the end, renal papillae, which is number 6. So you can see in the circular model with the number 6, but really it's here, it's also here. Remember, this whole thing is the pyramid. We call that the renal pyramid. It's number 7. The renal pyramid is number 7. In my model, you can see it here, very well labeled. Those are all pyramids. The renal corpuscles are these white dots. The renal corpuscles are these white dots, which obviously is, we see it one here, and then we have this whole model magnified as a renal corpuscle. What else? The ureter recovered, number 3. So renal medulla is deep, that's A. Renal cortex is B. Renal pyramids are 7. Minor calyx is 5. we don't need to know the major, just the minor. The minor is here, but technically the major calyx would be here. So minor calyx is like at the base of the pyramid. The minor calyx is at the base of the pyramid, the renal pyramid, which is number 7. And then collecting ducts, we said, was number 8, and then it's in white. The renal corpuscles are also white, but they're the circular dots. Number 12 are the renal corpuscles. And that's it for this kidney model. Moving on to the nephron. The nephron is really simple because we covered a lot of it. So the collecting duct that we saw here, this is just magnified. So number 6 is the collecting duct. It's like in the middle of the nephron. It's very thick. This here in thinner is the loop of Henle that's next to the collecting duct. So you have how would I describe this? You have the descending limb of the nephron loop, and that's going down. And then you have the ascending limb of the nephron loop. So descending limb of nephron loop, also called the loop of Henle, and the ascending limb of the nephron loop, loop of Henle. So the descending is 2B, and the ascending is 4C. So descending here, and then the ascending has a thin portion and then a thick portion. So thin, then thick, for the ascending limb of the nephron loop, the loop of Henle. Number 1 is your renal corpuscle, like I said before. The proximal convoluted tubule is 2A. We can see it here. The proximal convoluted tubule is below the distal convoluted tubule. So at the top of the nephron is the distal convoluted tubule, and we call that 4D. You can kind of see it. Here's 4D is the distal convoluted tubule. And then below it is the proximal convoluted tubule, which is 2A. The proximal is 2A, distal is 4D. Just remember distal is above proximal, but they're all connecting to the nephron loop, the loop of Henle. So technically the way that it would start would be the proximal convoluted tubule, or PCT, which branches into the descending limb of the nephron loop, of the loop of Henle, that goes into the ascending limb of the nephron loop, that then ends with the distal convoluted tubule, and then goes to the collecting duct, number 6. And those are the only things. But the other thing you need to know is the arcuate artery and vein, which I mentioned before, which is 7. So 7 red is the arcuate artery, 7 blue is the arcuate vein, arcuate artery and vein, and then interlobar artery and vein is number 8 on the nephron. So here you see it on the edge of the nephron model. It's literally right on the edge. So 8 is the interlobar vein. 8 red is the interlobar artery. Finally, we move to the renal corpuscle. So you have an afferent arteriole, which is here, the afferent arteriole, and you have an efferent arteriole. Afferent is going towards the renal corpuscles, bringing the flow of things towards. Efferent is leaving. This whole thing is called the glomerulus. This is the beginning of the proximal convoluted tubule. It's labeled number 3 in our actual model for the exam. You can see that here. The beginning of the proximal convoluted tubule is here, number 3. The Bowman's capsule, or the glomerular capsule, is this right here. And that's labeled number 2 in our actual model. And then you can see here the afferent arteriole, number 6, efferent 7. The beginning, yeah, I told you that. The macula densa cells of the distal convoluted tubule. So that's this green thing. This thing is green. So if we zoom into the green distal convoluted tubule, we can see the macula densa cells. Then these cells right here are part of the proximal convoluted tubule. And that makes sense because remember we said that this was distal and then proximal is right here, so they should be next to each other in this model, and they are. So we have the proximal convoluted tubule in green with its macula densa cells. Then we have our afferent arteriole, number 6, with its cells here that we call the juxtaglomerular cells. The juxtaglomerular cells are part of the afferent arteriole. The afferent arteriole. So, I don't know if I misspoke earlier. So this is the afferent arteriole. These are the juxtaglomerular cells. This in green is the distal convoluted tubule with its macula densa cells. The parietal glomerular epithelium is number 5. It's like almost like the Bowman's capsule lining, but it's the parietal glomerular cells, number 5, lining the outside of the capsule. Not the outside, technically inside. We call it the parietal glomerular cells. The parietal glomerular epithelium. So not cells, parietal glomerular epithelium. The podocytes are those white dots, number 9. They are in gray actually, not white. Number 9 is a podocyte. The visceral glomerular epithelium in gray. So these are podocytes. Podocytes of the visceral glomerular epithelium. Podocytes. Yeah. Parietal glomerular epithelium, number 5. Pretty sure I got everything. The glomerulus is the whole thing. The Bowman's capsule is number 2. The beginning of the proximal convoluted tubule, number 3. Podocytes are these dots. The parietal glomerular epithelium, number 5. Parietal glomerular epithelium. Distal convoluted tubule is green. We talked about it. The distal convoluted tubule, these are the macula densa cells on it. The juxtaglomerular cells, which are just on the afferent arteriole, the juxtaglomerular cells, and then the macula densa cells we talked about. Yeah, that's it.